What if the pain you keep facing is not random? What if the people you met, the battles you survived, and the emptiness that success could never remove are all connected to a promise your soul made before entering this life? Vedic wisdom suggests that your soul did not come here merely to earn, struggle, grow old and disappear. It came carrying unfinished karma, sacred lessons, and a hidden purpose that the mind forgot at birth. That may be why one lesson keeps returning through different people. That may be why certain relationships feel strangely familiar. And that may be why something within you keeps whispering that your life is meant for more. Stay until the 7th lesson, because it reveals the final promise your soul made, and the one most people never remember before death. As you listen, count how many of these promises are already appearing in your life. At the end, comment the number that speaks directly to your soul, and subscribe now if you are ready to uncover the forgotten Vedic truth behind your birth, karma, and destiny. Lesson 1. Your soul promised to remember who you truly are. The first promise your soul made was not to become rich, admired, powerful, or spiritually superior. It was to remember who you are beneath every temporary identity this world would place upon you. From the moment you entered life, people began describing you. You were given a name, a family, a body, a culture, and a role. As you grew, the world added more labels. You were called intelligent or ordinary, strong or weak, successful or disappointing. Slowly, these descriptions entered your mind, and you began mistaking them for your true self. You started believing that you were your body, even though the body continued changing. You believed you were your success, even though one failure could shake your confidence. You believed you were your reputation, even though every person carried a different version of you within their mind. But Vedic wisdom asks a question powerful enough to break the illusion. Who were you before the world began telling you who to become? Your body has changed since childhood. Your thoughts, desires, beliefs, and relationships have also changed. Yet through every transformation, something within you has remained present, the silent awareness witnessing it all. This inner witness is the doorway to Atman, the deepest self. You notice the thought, but forget the awareness observing it. You notice anger, grief, desire, and fear, but forget the quiet presence within which every emotion appears and disappears. Maya keeps the soul distracted by temporary forms so completely that it rarely turns toward the one experiencing them. This is why you may receive everything you once wanted and still feel incomplete. You may gain success, love, recognition, or comfort, yet a silent emptiness remains because the eternal soul cannot be satisfied entirely by temporary things. No possession can reveal your true identity because possessions can be lost. No relationship can become your complete foundation because relationships change. No achievement can permanently complete you because every achievement eventually becomes ordinary. Your soul's first promise was to stop searching for itself only in what time can take away. That promise is tested whenever life touches your identity. When someone criticizes you, do you become completely controlled by the wound, or can you observe the wounded ego without becoming it? When someone leaves, do you believe your value has disappeared with them? Or do you remember that your existence began before they arrived? When failure comes, do you say, "I failed at something"? Or does your mind declare, "I am a failure"? The ego turns every experience into an identity. It says, "You were rejected, therefore you are unlovable. You were betrayed, therefore you must never trust again. You succeeded, therefore you are greater than others." The soul sees the event, but refuses to become imprisoned by it. You may experience fear, but fear is not your eternal self. You may carry a wound, but the wound is not the whole of you. You may make mistakes, but your deepest consciousness is greater than one chapter of your life. True remembrance is not merely saying, "I am the soul." It must change the way you live. You are remembering when criticism no longer controls you as deeply. You are remembering when another person's success does not make you feel smaller. You are remembering when you can love without losing your dignity. You are remembering when you stop using pain as permission to create more pain. Sometimes remembrance begins when the old version of your life starts feeling empty. The approval you once chased becomes exhausting. The success you once dreamed of no longer feels sufficient. You quietly realize that you have become everything others expected, yet something essential within you still feels forgotten. That feeling may be your soul calling you back. It is not always asking you to abandon your life. It is asking you to live consciously. You can fulfill responsibilities without becoming only a role. You can care for the body without believing the body is all you are. You can pursue success without turning success into your identity. You can love people deeply without asking them to complete your entire existence. Some losses may even become invitations to remembrance. Life may remove a relationship, position, reputation, or dream that once defined you. The ego cries, "I am losing myself," but perhaps you are not losing yourself. Perhaps you are losing something you mistakenly believed was yourself. The first promise is fulfilled when the masks begin falling and you no longer fear what remains beneath them. The identity-seeking constant approval weakens. The identity built from pain loosens. The identity that measures worth through success begins to dissolve. Your soul promised that somewhere within this life you would hear the question that breaks Maya's spell. If I am not only my body, my thoughts, my wounds, my achievements, or the opinions of others, then who am I? Do not rush to answer. Observe the thoughts changing. Observe the emotions rising and falling. Observe the body moving through time. Then notice the awareness that remains present through them all. That is where remembrance begins. And the moment you stop searching for yourself only in what can be lost, you begin fulfilling the first hidden promise your soul made before birth. Lesson 2. Your soul promised to complete unfinished karma. The second promise your soul made before birth was to complete the lessons it had not fully learned. According to Vedic wisdom, karma is not simply a system of reward and punishment. It is the law through which every thought, intention, and action shapes the evolution of consciousness. Your soul did not return to be punished. It returned to become wiser. Have you ever noticed the same type of problem appearing again and again, even though the people and places keep changing? Perhaps you repeatedly trust the wrong people. Perhaps you constantly seek approval from others. Perhaps fear keeps stopping you just as you are about to grow. These repeating patterns are rarely accidents. They are often unfinished lessons asking for your attention. Most people ask, "Why does this always happen to me?" But the awakened soul begins asking a different question. What is this experience trying to teach me that I still refuse to learn? That single question changes everything. Imagine a student who refuses to learn a lesson in school. The examination does not disappear. It returns until the lesson is understood. Karma works in a similar way. Life keeps presenting the same inner challenge through different faces, different situations, and different chapters until your response finally changes. A person who never learns forgiveness may keep experiencing betrayal. A person who constantly abandons themselves for others may continue attracting relationships that demand sacrifice without respect. A person ruled by pride may repeatedly face situations that humble them. These are not random punishments. They are opportunities for awakening. The hidden promise your soul made was not to escape these lessons, but to rise above them. Every time you choose awareness instead of habit, compassion instead of hatred, truth instead of fear, or wisdom instead of anger, an old karmic chain begins to break. This is why some of your greatest struggles may actually be your greatest opportunities. The pain is not asking you to suffer forever. It is asking you to become someone who no longer needs to repeat the same lesson. Your destiny changes the moment your consciousness changes. Perhaps the challenge that keeps returning to your life is not there to destroy you. Perhaps it is the very promise your soul came here to fulfill. Lesson 3. Your soul promised to meet the people who would awaken you. The third promise your soul made before birth was to meet certain people who would awaken something hidden within you. Some would enter your life with love, some with pain, some with comfort, and some with confusion. Not every person would stay, but almost every important person would leave behind a lesson your soul needed. This is why certain connections feel unusually powerful from the beginning. You may meet someone for the first time and feel as though you have known them for years. Their presence may feel familiar, their words may touch an old place inside you, and the bond may become intense before your mind can explain it. Vedic wisdom teaches that some relationships carry karmic energy. They return not always to remain forever, but to complete something unfinished. One person may teach you how deeply you can love. Another may reveal how easily you lose yourself while trying to be loved. One may show you loyalty, while another exposes your fear of abandonment. Some people will awaken your compassion, others will awaken your boundaries. Some will stay beside you during darkness, while others will become the reason you finally discover your own strength. The mistake many people make is believing that every deep connection must become permanent. But spiritual importance and lifelong duration are not the same thing. A relationship can be sacred and still be temporary. A person can change your life and still not be meant to walk beside you forever. Sometimes the soul brings someone close because their presence reveals the wound you have been avoiding. They may expose your need for approval, your fear of being alone, your habit of overgiving, or your tendency to accept disrespect in the name of love. The pain of the relationship may not be proof that you failed. It may be the moment the hidden lesson finally became impossible to ignore. This does not mean you should remain in harmful situations or excuse cruelty by calling it karma. Vedic wisdom does not ask you to surrender your dignity. It asks you to become conscious. The lesson may not be to keep holding on. The lesson may be to finally let go without hatred. Ask yourself, what did this person awaken in me? Did they teach you patience? Or did they reveal where patience had become self-neglect? Did they teach you trust? Or did they show you the cost of ignoring your intuition? Did they help you feel love? Or did they force you to see how dependent your happiness had become on another person? These questions turn pain into awareness. Before awakening, you ask, why did they leave me? After awakening begins, you ask, what did their presence come to show me? Perhaps they came to remind you that love without self-respect becomes bondage. Perhaps they came to break the identity you built around being needed. Perhaps they came to teach you that forgiveness does not always mean reunion. Perhaps they came to show you that peace is more sacred than emotional intensity. Some relationships feel powerful because they activate an unfinished karmic pattern. The attraction may be strong, but peace may be absent. You may feel unable to leave even when the relationship keeps hurting you. In such moments, the mind often mistakes attachment for destiny. But destiny does not always mean staying. Sometimes destiny is the courage to end what the old version of you would have tolerated forever. Your soul promised to meet people who would act like mirrors. Some mirrors would show your beauty, others would reveal your wounds. Both were necessary, because awakening does not happen only through comfort. It often begins when a relationship brings your hidden patterns to the surface. The most important question is not whether every person stays. It is whether you become more conscious because they came. Can you love without trying to possess? Can you forgive without reopening the door to harm? Can you walk away without turning pain into hatred? Can you honor the lesson without worshipping the person who delivered it? When you can do this, the karmic purpose of the relationship begins to complete itself. The person may leave, but the wisdom remains. And perhaps that was the promise all along. Not that every soul would stay with you forever, but that every meaningful meeting would bring you closer to the truth you came here to remember. Lesson 4. Your soul promised to walk the path of Dharma. The fourth promise your soul made before birth was to discover and walk the path of Dharma, the path that brings your actions, values, responsibilities, and deepest truth into alignment. Dharma is not merely a career, a talent, or one grand mission waiting to be found. It is the way of living that allows your soul to express what it came here to become. Many people spend their entire lives following paths chosen by fear, comparison, family pressure, social expectations, or the desire to be admired. They study what others respect, pursue what society calls success, and build lives that appear complete from the outside. Yet somewhere within them, a quiet emptiness remains because they are living a life that looks correct but does not feel true. This inner restlessness may not mean that you are ungrateful. It may mean your Dharma is calling you. Your soul did not promise to become what everyone expected. It promised to become honest enough to recognize what is truly yours to do. The world may reward imitation, but the soul finds peace only through alignment. A river cannot fulfill its nature by trying to become a mountain, and a tree cannot discover its purpose by comparing itself with the stars. Every part of creation expresses itself differently, yet each becomes meaningful by remaining faithful to its nature. In the same way, your path cannot be discovered entirely by copying someone else's life. This is why comparison is so dangerous. You may look at another person's success and believe you are falling behind, without realizing that their journey was never meant to be your measurement. Their timing, responsibilities, lessons, and karmic path are different from yours. What appears like delay in your life may actually be preparation. What looks like failure may be life redirecting you away from a path that would have taken you farther from yourself. Dharma often speaks quietly. It may appear as an idea that keeps returning, a responsibility you cannot ignore, a truth you feel compelled to express, or a form of service that gives meaning to your effort. Sometimes it appears through natural ability, sometimes through pain. The wound you struggled to heal may become the place from which you help others. The confusion you once survived may become the wisdom you later share. But Dharma is not always dramatic. It may not make you famous, wealthy, or publicly admired. It can be present in raising a child with awareness, caring for an elderly parent, teaching with patience, protecting someone vulnerable, creating something honest, fulfilling your work with integrity, or becoming the person who brings peace into a place filled with conflict. The spiritual value of an action is not measured only by how many people see it. A small duty performed with sincerity can carry more Dharma than a great public achievement driven entirely by pride. This is where your soul's promise becomes difficult, because Dharma often demands that you choose truth over comfort. Fear may tell you to remain silent, but Dharma may ask you to speak. Desire may tell you to chase immediate pleasure, but Dharma may ask you to protect your future. Ego may tell you to prove that you are right, but Dharma may ask you to preserve peace without betraying truth. The path of Dharma is not always the easiest path. Sometimes it is the path that costs you approval. You may have to disappoint people who benefited from your silence. You may have to leave an environment that rewards dishonesty. You may have to refuse opportunities that look successful but disturb your conscience. You may have to continue serving quietly while others receive the recognition you hoped for. These moments reveal whether you are living for applause or alignment. The ego asks, "Will people admire me?" Dharma asks, "Is this right?" The ego asks, "What will I gain?" Dharma asks, "What must I become?" The ego asks, "How can I avoid discomfort?" Dharma asks, "What truth is this discomfort asking me to face?" This does not mean every difficult path is automatically your Dharma. Suffering alone does not make an action sacred. Dharma carries responsibility, clarity, integrity, and a deeper sense of inner alignment. It may be challenging, but beneath the challenge, there is often a quiet knowing that you are no longer betraying yourself. When you repeatedly act against this inner knowing, the soul becomes restless. You may feel exhausted even when life appears comfortable. You may become irritated without understanding why. You may achieve more and enjoy less. This happens because the outer life is moving in one direction, while the inner truth is calling you toward another. The longer you ignore Dharma, the louder the dissatisfaction may become. Life may then begin removing what keeps you trapped. A job may end, a relationship may change, a plan may collapse. At first, you may call it failure. Later, you may realize that what broke was the path that no longer belonged to you. Sometimes the soul cannot guide you forward until the false path becomes impossible to continue. Your promise was not to know every step from the beginning. It was to keep listening. Dharma often reveals itself gradually. You receive enough clarity for the next honest action, not the entire map. The mind demands certainty before moving, but the soul often asks for courage before certainty appears. You may not know where the new path will lead, but you may know clearly that the old one is no longer true. This is where trust begins. Walking your Dharma also requires discipline. Inspiration may reveal the direction, but daily action builds the path. A calling without commitment becomes only imagination. If you feel called to teach, you must learn. If you feel called to create, you must practice. If you feel called to serve, you must become reliable. If you feel called to speak truth, you must develop the courage to live according to the truth you speak. Dharma is not fulfilled through desire alone. It is fulfilled through responsibility. You cannot say you are following your soul while avoiding every duty that demands patience, effort, or sacrifice. Sometimes your Dharma is not hidden in the future. It is waiting inside the responsibility already placed before you. The way you perform today's duty prepares you for tomorrow's purpose. Your soul may be watching how you handle small commitments before placing greater ones in your hands. Can you remain honest when dishonesty would be easier? Can you continue when nobody praises you? Can you serve without constantly asking what you will receive in return? These choices shape the person capable of carrying a larger purpose. Dharma also protects you from living through envy. When you know your path, another person's light no longer threatens you. You can celebrate their success because it does not reduce what belongs to you. You understand that the sun, moon, stars, rivers, and trees do not compete for one position. Each contributes through its own nature. The same intelligence that gave another person their gift placed something within you as well. Your task is not to become them. Your task is to remove the fear, distraction, and self-doubt, preventing your own nature from being expressed. Sometimes the greatest obstacle is not lack of ability, but the fear of being misunderstood. You may already know the truth of your path, yet hesitate because it does not match what others imagined for you. But remember this: the people around you can advise you, love you, and support you, but they cannot hear the deepest call of your soul in the same way you can. You are the one who must live with the consequences of abandoning it. This does not mean rejecting wise guidance or acting impulsively. Dharma requires discernment, not rebellion for its own sake. The goal is not to oppose everyone. The goal is to stop opposing your deepest truth merely to remain acceptable. Your soul promised to become brave enough to live a life that feels honest within, not merely impressive from a distance. That promise is fulfilled whenever you choose integrity over convenience, service over selfishness, discipline over distraction, and truth over the fear of judgment. Every such choice brings the outer life closer to the inner self, and when your actions finally begin moving in the same direction as your deepest values, something changes. You may still face difficulty, but the emptiness weakens. You may still feel fear, but fear no longer controls every decision. You may still be uncertain, but there is a quiet strength in knowing that you are no longer abandoning the path your soul came here to walk. Perhaps your purpose is not missing. Perhaps it has been speaking through the same longing, responsibility, and inner truth you keep trying to silence. Your soul's fourth promise was to listen and then become courageous enough to follow. Lesson 5. Your soul promised to transform pain into wisdom. The fifth promise your soul made before birth was not that you would avoid every wound, escape every loss, or live untouched by disappointment. The promise was that whatever pain entered your life would not be wasted. Your soul agreed that suffering would become a doorway, that loss would reveal what attachment had hidden, and that every experience capable of breaking your old identity could also awaken a deeper strength within you. This is one of the hardest spiritual truths to accept, because when pain first arrives, it does not feel sacred. It feels unfair. It feels like life has turned against you. A betrayal does not immediately feel like wisdom. A death does not immediately feel like transformation. Failure does not feel like redirection when the dream you trusted is collapsing in front of you. In the beginning, pain feels only like pain. But Vedic wisdom does not ask you to pretend that suffering is pleasant. It does not ask you to smile while your heart is breaking or deny the grief moving through your body. True spirituality is not the performance of strength. It is the courage to remain conscious while the old world within you is falling apart. The hidden promise was not to feel nothing. It was to feel deeply without allowing pain to become the permanent ruler of your life. Many people do not suffer only because of what happened. They continue suffering because they build an identity around the wound. A painful event becomes a permanent definition. Betrayal becomes, I can never trust again. Rejection becomes, I am not worthy of love. Failure becomes, I was never meant to succeed. Loss becomes, my life can never have meaning again. The event may have lasted one moment, 1 month, or 1 year, but the identity created around it may continue for decades. This is where pain becomes bondage. Your soul promised to carry the lesson forward without carrying the prison. The ego says, because this happened to me, I will remain this person forever. The soul says, this happened through my human experience, but I am greater than what happened. I can allow the wound to teach me without giving it ownership of my future. This does not mean forgetting. Some experiences cannot and should not be erased. It means remembering without bleeding from the same place every day. It means reaching a point where the memory remains, but it no longer controls every choice you make. Perhaps someone betrayed you when you trusted them completely. For a time, your anger may have protected you. Suspicion may have felt safer than vulnerability. You may have promised yourself that nobody would ever reach your heart again. But eventually, protection can become a prison. The same wall that keeps pain out can also keep love, connection, and peace from entering. Your soul's promise was not to return to blind trust. It was to transform betrayal into discernment. Discernment does not say, trust everyone. It says, observe clearly. It does not say, ignore warning signs. It says, respect your intuition without allowing fear to control you. It does not say, give endless chances to people who repeatedly harm you. It says, forgive the poison within yourself, but keep the boundary that wisdom created. This is how pain begins changing form. What once made you weak becomes the source of clarity. What once made you dependent teaches you self-respect. What once silenced you teaches you to speak. What once made you beg for love teaches you that love without dignity is not the love your soul came here to learn. Every wound carries a question. Betrayal asks, will you become bitter or will you become wise? Rejection asks, will you measure your worth through another person's decision, or will you finally discover value within yourself? Failure asks, will you make one result your identity, or will you learn, rebuild, and move differently? Loneliness asks, will you run toward anyone who distracts you, or will you finally learn how to sit with your own soul? Loss asks, will you close your heart forever, or will you love more consciously because you now understand that everything in time is temporary? These questions are not answered through words. They are answered through the person you become after the pain. Two people may experience the same suffering and emerge completely differently. One becomes cruel, while another becomes compassionate. One uses the wound as permission to harm others, while another decides that nobody should feel the pain they once carried. One becomes trapped in the past, while another carries the wisdom into a new life. This reveals something important. Pain alone does not create wisdom. Pain creates an opening. Awareness determines what enters through it. Without awareness, suffering can become resentment, fear, revenge, or self-destruction. With awareness, suffering can become patience, humility, compassion, strength, and truth. Your soul did not promise that every wound would automatically transform you. It promised that every wound would offer the possibility of transformation. You still had to choose. You still had to look honestly at yourself. You still had to stop blaming everyone long enough to see what the experience was revealing within you. This does not mean you were responsible for another person's cruelty. You are not to blame for every wound that entered your life. People make harmful choices, and injustice is real. But once the pain enters your consciousness, your response becomes part of your responsibility. You may not have chosen the wound, but you participate in what the wound becomes. Will it become the reason you destroy future relationships? Will it become the reason you stop believing in yourself? Will it become the reason you repeat the same harm upon someone innocent? Or will it become the moment you decide that the chain ends with you? This is where karma can be transformed. A wounded person often unconsciously creates more wounds. Someone who was controlled may later become controlling. Someone who felt abandoned may abandon others before they can be left. Someone who was humiliated may seek power by humiliating someone weaker. The pain moves from one person to another because nobody stops long enough to become conscious of it. Your soul's fifth promise was to interrupt this movement, to say, "I will not allow what hurt me to teach me how to hurt." This may be one of the greatest forms of spiritual courage. It is easy to become what harmed you. It is easier to pass pain forward than to transform it. Transformation requires patience because you must sit with emotions that cannot be solved in one moment. You must face anger without acting through it, grief without drowning in it, and fear without obeying every command it gives. You must learn to observe the wound until you understand its language. Sometimes anger is protecting sadness. Sometimes control is protecting fear. Sometimes jealousy is protecting insecurity. Sometimes emotional distance is protecting the terror of being rejected again. The surface emotion is not always the deepest truth. When you begin looking beneath it, healing becomes possible. You may realize that you were never angry only because someone left. You were angry because their departure awakened an older belief that everyone eventually abandons you. You may discover that one present event is carrying the weight of many past wounds. This awareness is powerful because it prevents you from treating the current moment as though it contains your entire history. Not everyone is the person who hurt you before. Not every silence is rejection. Not every disagreement is abandonment. Not every failure is proof that life is against you. Pain often teaches the nervous system to expect danger, even when the danger has passed. The soul's work is to bring awareness into that fear, patiently reminding the mind and body that the past is not always repeating itself. Healing does not happen because you force yourself to forget. It happens because you learn to remain present when the old wound tries to control the new moment. There may be times when life removes something you believed was essential. A relationship ends, a plan collapses, a position disappears, or the future you imagined is no longer possible. In that moment, the ego experiences death because it had attached identity to that form. It says, "Without this, I do not know who I am." And perhaps that is exactly why the loss becomes spiritually powerful. It forces you to discover who remains when the thing you depended upon is gone. You may have built your entire identity around being loved by one person. When they leave, the emptiness feels unbearable. But beneath the grief, another lesson slowly appears. You had given someone else authority over your sense of worth. The soul does not rejoice in the loss, but it can use the loss to recover what had been surrendered. You begin learning that love is beautiful, but another person should not become the only reason you believe your life has value. You begin recognizing that connection is sacred, but dependency can disguise itself as devotion. You begin seeing that holding on is not always proof of love. Sometimes it is proof of fear. This wisdom could not always be learned while everything remained comfortable. Comfort allows illusions to remain hidden. Pain exposes them. A painful experience may reveal how much approval controlled you, how often you ignored your intuition, how easily you abandoned your truth to avoid conflict, or how deeply your happiness depended on circumstances remaining unchanged. What pain reveals can be uncomfortable, but what remains hidden cannot be healed. This is why suffering sometimes becomes an initiation. The person who enters the experience is not the same person who emerges from it. Something false dies. A belief, dependency, identity, or illusion can no longer survive. At first, this feels like destruction. Later, you may recognize it as liberation. Perhaps the version of you that disappeared was the one who accepted disrespect because loneliness felt more frightening than pain. Perhaps the life that collapsed was built upon the need to impress people who never truly understood you. Perhaps the dream that failed belonged to an identity seeking approval rather than genuine purpose. Pain may remove what your fear was unwilling to release, but transformation does not happen through pain alone. It happens through the meaning you consciously create from it. You must eventually ask questions that the wounded ego does not want to ask. What did this experience reveal about me? What warning did I ignore? What boundary must now exist? What belief must be released? What strength did I discover only because life demanded it? What compassion has this suffering awakened within me? These questions are not meant to blame you. They are meant to return power to you. Blame keeps all power in the hands of the person or event that hurt you. Awareness gives you the ability to decide what happens next. You cannot rewrite what occurred, but you can refuse to let it write every chapter that follows. This is the difference between carrying a scar and carrying an open wound. A scar remembers, but it no longer bleeds at every touch. It becomes evidence that healing was possible. Some of the wisest people are not those who avoided darkness. They are those who entered it without allowing darkness to become their nature. They learned how fragile life can be, and this made them more grateful. They learned how deeply words can wound, and this made them speak more carefully. They learned what loneliness feels like, and this made them kinder to those who feel unseen. Their suffering became service. The wound they once hid became the place from which they understood others. This may be part of your promise as well. What nearly destroyed you may one day help you recognize someone else's pain. Your experience may become the wisdom that prevents another person from making the same mistake. Your survival may become proof that a person can lose everything they thought they needed and still discover a deeper life within themselves. You may not understand the purpose of your pain while you are inside it. A seed buried in darkness cannot see the tree it is becoming. Transformation often happens silently. While you believe nothing is changing, roots are growing beneath the surface. Your values are changing. Your tolerance for dishonesty is weakening. Your understanding of love is becoming clearer. Your relationship with yourself is being rebuilt. Then one day, you face a situation that would once have destroyed you, and you respond differently. You no longer beg someone to recognize your worth. You no longer chase what has clearly chosen to leave. You no longer remain silent to keep temporary peace. You no longer confuse emotional intensity with love. You no longer allow one failure to decide the meaning of your life. This is how you know pain has begun turning into wisdom. The situation may appear similar, but you are no longer the same consciousness entering it. The old wound may still whisper, but it no longer commands. The fifth promise also asks you to release resentment. Not because the person who hurt you always deserves access to your life, but because your soul deserves freedom from carrying them within your mind. Resentment creates an invisible relationship with the past. The person may be gone, yet you continue speaking to them in your thoughts, replaying what happened, imagining different endings, and allowing their actions to shape your emotional state. Forgiveness, in its deepest form, is not always reconciliation. It does not mean saying the harm was acceptable. It means choosing not to remain spiritually chained to the event. You can forgive and never return. You can release hatred and still keep distance. You can wish someone healing without offering them another opportunity to harm you. This is not weakness. It is wisdom without bitterness. The soul's promise was not to win every battle against those who wounded you. It was to prevent them from becoming permanent occupants of your consciousness. Sometimes the greatest victory is becoming so free that you no longer need revenge, explanation, or apology to continue your life. You stop waiting for them to admit what they did. You stop waiting for the past to become different. You accept that closure may not arrive from the person who created the wound. It may have to arise from your own decision to stop reopening it. This acceptance can feel painful because it ends the hope that someone else will repair what they broke. But it also returns your healing to your own hands. Your soul promised to discover that peace does not require the past to apologize. It requires you to stop giving the past authority over the present. There may always be moments when the wound returns. Healing is not a straight path. A memory, place, voice, or unexpected event may awaken emotions you believed were gone. Do not treat this as failure. Sometimes the soul revisits an old wound to show you how much has changed. You are not standing where you once stood. You now carry awareness, boundaries, and strength that did not exist before. The emotion may return, but you do not have to become it. Observe it, honor it. Let it move through you without building your identity around it again. The river does not hold every leaf that falls upon its surface. It allows each one to pass. Your consciousness can learn the same freedom. The fifth promise is fulfilled when pain no longer makes your heart smaller. It may make you more careful, but not cruel, more discerning, but not closed, more humble, but not broken, more aware of impermanence, but still willing to love. You begin understanding that strength is not never being wounded. Strength is remaining capable of goodness after the world gave you reasons to become bitter. It is choosing not to pass your darkness to someone who did not create it. It is standing inside the ruins of what you once believed your life would be and deciding that your story is not finished. Perhaps the pain you have carried was never proof that your soul was abandoned. Perhaps it was the place where an older identity was being stripped away so that a wiser one could emerge. Perhaps the betrayal was teaching discernment. Perhaps the failure was redirecting your Dharma. Perhaps the loneliness was teaching you to stop abandoning yourself. Perhaps the ending was creating space for a life the old version of you would never have been ready to receive. You do not have to call every painful experience a blessing, but you can refuse to let it remain meaningless. Your soul's fifth promise was to take what tried to break you and turn it into consciousness, compassion, boundaries, strength, and wisdom. And the moment you can look at your wound and say, "You changed me, but you no longer control me," the promise begins to fulfill itself. Lesson 6. Your soul promised to release what it could never keep. The sixth promise your soul made before birth was to learn the sacred art of release. You entered a world where everything moves, changes, grows, fades, arrives, and eventually departs. Yet the human mind immediately began asking life for permanence. It wanted youth to remain, relationships to remain, success to remain, comfort to remain, beauty to remain, and every cherished moment to stay exactly as it was. But life never made that agreement. The seasons change, the body changes, people change, desires change, and even the identity you carry today may not survive the person you are becoming tomorrow. Your soul knew this before entering the world. It knew that attachment would become one of the greatest sources of suffering. It knew that you would love people who could not stay forever, build dreams that might take a different shape, and hold identities that time would eventually ask you to release. Yet the promise was not that you would avoid love, refuse connection, or live without desire. The promise was that one day you would learn how to love without turning love into possession, and how to hold life without demanding that life stop changing. This is the true meaning of detachment. Detachment does not mean that you stop caring. It does not mean becoming cold, distant, or emotionally empty. It means caring deeply while understanding that love does not give you ownership over another soul. It means giving your best without making one result the entire foundation of your peace. It means honoring what is present without trying to imprison it against the movement of time. Many people confuse attachment with love because attachment can feel intense. Attachment says, "I need you to remain exactly as I want you to remain so that I can feel safe." Love says, "I honor your presence, but I do not own your journey." Attachment says, "Without you, I am nothing." Love says, "You enrich my life, but my deepest self did not begin with your arrival." Attachment demands control. Love allows truth. This difference is difficult to recognize because attachment often disguises itself as devotion. You may believe you are holding on because you love deeply, when in reality you are terrified of what you will feel if you let go. You may keep returning to a painful relationship because the emptiness of separation appears more frightening than the pain of staying. You may continue chasing a person who has already chosen distance because your ego cannot accept that something important can end without your permission. In such moments, the soul is not only grieving the person, it is grieving the identity built around them. You may have become the one who was needed, the one who was chosen, the one who was loved, or the one who was expected to save the relationship. When the bond changes, the ego feels as though a part of itself is dying. This is why some endings feel greater than the loss of a person. They destroy the version of the future you had already created in your mind. The mind does not only attach to what exists, it attaches to what it imagined would exist. It attaches to the marriage that did not happen, the career that did not unfold, the apology that never arrived, the child who would remain young, the body that would stay strong, and the life that would continue according to a plan. When reality refuses to match the imagined future, suffering begins. The pain does not always come from the moment itself. It comes from the difference between what is and what the mind insists should have been. The sixth promise asks you to close that distance. It asks you to see reality clearly without constantly arguing with it. Acceptance does not mean you approve of everything that happened. It does not mean that betrayal was right, loss was fair, or every ending was easy. Acceptance means you stop demanding that the past become different before you allow yourself to move forward. So much of human suffering is created by an invisible argument with what has already occurred. The mind says, "They should not have left. This should not have happened. I should have been given another chance. Life should have followed my plan." These thoughts may be understandable, but if repeated endlessly, they become chains. The past does not change because you continue resisting it. Only your present life becomes smaller. Your soul promised to learn that peace does not begin when the past finally obeys your wishes. Peace begins when you stop requiring the past to change in order for you to live again. This is one of the hardest forms of surrender. Surrender is often misunderstood as weakness. People imagine that surrender means giving up, accepting defeat, or refusing to protect what matters. But spiritual surrender is not the abandonment of effort. It is the release of control over what effort cannot guarantee. You can speak honestly, but you cannot force another person to understand. You can love sincerely, but you cannot command someone to love you in return. You can work with discipline, but you cannot control every result. You can care for the body, but you cannot stop time. You can plan wisely, but you cannot force life to follow every plan. You can offer forgiveness, but you cannot decide whether another person changes. Your responsibility lies within your intention, effort, choices, and response. Beyond that, life moves through causes too vast for the individual mind to control. Attachment begins when you try to carry what does not belong entirely to you. You start carrying another person's decision, another person's healing, another person's opinion, or the complete outcome of every action. Soon, the weight becomes unbearable because you are trying to become the owner of events that were never fully yours. Your soul's sixth promise was to put down this burden, to do your part, and release what belongs to time, karma, and the freedom of other souls. This does not remove responsibility. It makes responsibility clear. You remain responsible for honesty, but not for whether honesty earns approval. You remain responsible for love, but not for controlling the person you love. You remain responsible for effort, but not for every consequence created by forces beyond your reach. You remain responsible for your healing, but not for forcing the person who wounded you to understand your pain. The soul becomes lighter when it stops carrying the entire universe on its shoulders. Yet the ego fears this lightness because control gives it the illusion of safety. The ego believes that if it worries enough, plans enough, thinks enough, or holds tightly enough, it can prevent change. But worry does not create certainty. It only steals the peace of the present before the future has even arrived. Attachment to the future is one of the most subtle forms of suffering. You may spend years waiting for the next achievement, relationship, opportunity, or level of success, believing that life will begin once it arrives. The present becomes only a bridge to something else. You fail to notice the day you are living because your mind is already bargaining with tomorrow. Then, when tomorrow arrives, the mind creates another future. The promised moment of satisfaction keeps moving. This is how a person can spend an entire life waiting to live. Your soul did not promise to reject ambition. It promised to stop sacrificing the present to endless desire. You can work toward a better future while still honoring the life already here. You can pursue growth without treating your current self as unworthy. You can create plans without making happiness depend entirely on their success. The deeper lesson of detachment is that desire is not the enemy. Enslavement to desire is the problem. You may desire love, but when the desire becomes, "I cannot be whole without this one person," suffering begins. You may desire success, but when it becomes, "Without recognition, my life has no value," bondage begins. You may desire security, but when it becomes, "Nothing must ever change," fear begins. Every attachment contains an unconscious condition placed upon peace. I will be peaceful when this person returns. I will be happy when I achieve this. I will feel worthy when people admire me. I will relax when everything is under control. The soul keeps waiting because the condition is rarely permanent. The sixth promise was to remove these conditions one by one, not because relationships, success, comfort, and recognition are meaningless, but because they were never meant to carry the full weight of your identity. A relationship can bring joy, but it cannot permanently protect you from loneliness if you do not know how to remain with yourself. Success can bring opportunity, but it cannot heal a worth built upon comparison. Recognition can feel beautiful, but it cannot provide lasting peace to a mind addicted to approval. Temporary things can offer temporary experiences. The mistake is demanding eternal security from them. This is why life sometimes removes what you cling to most strongly, not as punishment, but as revelation. When something disappears, the depth of attachment becomes visible. You suddenly see how much identity, hope, and safety had been placed within one form. At first, the loss feels like emptiness, but within that emptiness lies a question. Who are you without what you were holding? This question can terrify the ego because the ego builds itself from attachments. I am successful. I am admired. I am needed. I am loved by this person. I possess this. I belong to this role. When the attachment falls, the statement, "I am," appears incomplete. Yet this incompleteness can become a doorway. You begin discovering that the deepest I am existed before the possession, position, relationship, and identity. It witnessed their arrival, and now witnesses their departure. What changes cannot be the complete truth of the one witnessing change. The sixth promise is therefore connected to remembrance. You can release only when you recognize that your essence is greater than what you are releasing. If you believe your identity is completely contained in one relationship, letting go feels like death. If you know the relationship is one meaningful expression within a larger consciousness, grief remains, but annihilation weakens. You can mourn without believing that your entire being has disappeared. This is the wisdom of holding life with open hands. A closed hand may keep something for a moment, but it also cannot receive anything new. An open hand risks loss, but it remains available to life. Many people remain trapped, not because the past is holding them, but because they refuse to open their hands. They hold old anger, old guilt, old dreams, old versions of themselves, and old relationships that no longer exist, except within memory. They believe that releasing the pain means denying its importance. They fear that moving forward means the past did not matter. But release does not erase meaning. You can honor what happened without living inside it. You can love someone who is no longer present. You can be grateful for a chapter without trying to reopen it. You can remember the person you once were without forcing yourself to remain that person forever. Sometimes you must release not only what hurt you, but also what was once beautiful. This can be even more difficult. Pain gives the mind reasons to leave, but beauty creates reasons to stay attached. A cherished relationship may end, not because it was false, but because life moved in different directions. A place may remain precious, yet no longer belong to your path. A dream may once have been true, but the soul may now be called towards something else. The ego says, if it was good, it must remain. Wisdom says, something can be sacred and still be complete. A flower does not become meaningless because it fades. A sunset is not a failure because it ends. Its impermanence is part of what makes its beauty visible. In the same way, some relationships and seasons become sacred precisely because they could not last forever. Your soul promised to learn gratitude without possession, to say, this was beautiful, this changed me, and now I release it. This is not emotional weakness, it is spiritual maturity. The inability to let go often comes from fear that nothing equally meaningful will arrive again. The mind clings to the known, even when the known is painful, because uncertainty appears dangerous. It says, at least I understand this suffering. I do not know what exists beyond it. So you remain attached to old pain because it has become familiar. You replay memories, search for explanations, revisit conversations, and imagine different outcomes. The past becomes a room you continue entering, even though nothing inside has changed. The soul waits at the door. It does not demand that you forget. It asks whether you are ready to stop living there. Every time you revisit the past, ask yourself whether you are receiving wisdom or reopening the wound. Reflection can heal, but repetition without awareness can become self-punishment. There is a moment when understanding must become release. You may never know every reason someone changed. You may never receive the apology you deserved. You may never understand why one opportunity disappeared or why one path closed. The mind believes closure requires complete explanation. The soul discovers that sometimes closure is a decision. You decide that unanswered questions will no longer consume your life. You decide that the silence of another person will no longer define your worth. You decide that the past may remain incomplete, yet your future does not have to remain imprisoned by it. This decision does not always create immediate peace. Release can be gradual. The mind may return many times to what it once held. Detachment is not one dramatic moment, but a repeated act of returning to truth. You release today, remember tomorrow, grieve again, and release once more. Each time, the attachment weakens. The soul is learning that freedom is a practice. This is especially true when releasing guilt. You may carry an old mistake, as though endless self-punishment can change what happened. You believe that suffering proves you are sorry, but guilt without transformation does not serve anyone. It keeps you attached to the version of yourself who made the mistake. The sixth promise asks you to take responsibility without becoming permanently identified with your worst moment. Responsibility says, I was wrong. I must repair what I can, learn deeply, and change. Shame says, I am wrong. I deserve no future. One leads to growth, the other leads to paralysis. Your soul did not promise to remain innocent of every mistake. It promised to become conscious enough not to repeat them. There comes a point when continuing to hate yourself is no longer accountability. It is attachment to the past. Release means honoring the lesson by becoming different. You cannot undo every harm, but you can refuse to continue being the same consciousness that created it. You can apologize where possible, repair what can be repaired, accept consequences, and then live in a way that proves the lesson was not wasted. Self-forgiveness is not permission to avoid responsibility. It is permission to grow beyond the identity of the mistake. You may also need to release resentment. Resentment feels powerful because it keeps the wound connected to the person who caused it. It says, "I will not release this, because then they will escape what they did." But your resentment does not always punish them. It often keeps you emotionally tied to them. They may be absent from your life but present in your mind every day. Their voice appears in your decisions. Their actions shape your trust. Their memory controls your emotional state. This is a form of continued attachment. Forgiveness does not mean inviting them back. It does not mean pretending the harm was acceptable. It means refusing to let their action remain the center of your consciousness. You can release hatred and keep the boundary. You can wish them no harm and still choose distance. You can forgive the past without reopening the door. This is what many people misunderstand. Detachment is not the absence of wisdom. It is wisdom without emotional slavery. The soul wants freedom, not denial. The sixth promise also asks you to release the need to be understood by everyone. This attachment is subtle because it often appears righteous. You want people to see your intentions, recognize your goodness, and understand your side of the story. When they misunderstand you, the ego becomes restless. It wants to explain, defend, prove, and convince. Sometimes explanation is necessary, but there comes a point when repeating your truth to someone committed to misunderstanding you becomes self-abandonment. Not every mind is willing to see you clearly. Some people will interpret you through their wounds, jealousy, fear, or expectations. You cannot enter their consciousness and force a different perception. Your soul promised to stop building peace upon another person's interpretation. You are responsible for acting with integrity. You are not responsible for controlling every story people tell about you. This freedom changes everything. You no longer spend endless energy trying to correct every opinion. You no longer make your worth dependent upon public approval. You begin understanding that being misunderstood is sometimes the cost of remaining faithful to your path. Dharma may ask you to make choices that others cannot immediately accept. Detachment gives you the strength to continue without becoming bitter. The sixth promise also involves releasing comparison. Comparison is attachment to another person's path. You look at their success, beauty, relationships, progress, or recognition, and use it as evidence that your own life is incomplete. You forget that you are comparing your inner struggle with their outer image. You forget that every soul carries a different karmic path, timing, responsibility, and lesson. Comparison makes you abandon what belongs to you while chasing what belongs to someone else. The soul becomes divided. Instead of asking, "What is my next true step?" you ask, "Why am I not where they are?" Your energy leaves your own path and becomes trapped in observation. The sixth promise asks you to return, to release the life you imagined you should have because someone else appears to have it, to bless another person's path without turning it into proof of your failure, to trust that delay may be protection, preparation, or redirection. A fruit does not ripen faster because it envies the tree beside it. Your life unfolds according to causes you cannot always see. Detachment allows patience. You continue acting, learning, and growing, but you stop demanding that your journey match another person's timing. This is not passivity. It is focused effort without self-destruction. The same lesson applies to success. You may work with sincerity and still not receive immediate recognition. The ego becomes angry because it was secretly attached not only to the work, but to applause. It begins asking whether effort has value if nobody sees it. Your soul promised to discover the purity of action without constant reward. This is one of the central teachings associated with the Vedic path. Perform the action that aligns with Dharma, but do not make your entire inner state dependent upon the fruit. The fruit matters, but attachment to it corrupts the action. When you become obsessed with recognition, fear enters your work. You begin creating for approval, serving for praise, and speaking for admiration. The action may appear noble, but the inner freedom disappears. Detachment restores sincerity. You do your best because the action is worthy, not only because the world may reward you. You offer the result to something greater than personal ego. Success may come, and you receive it without becoming possessed by pride. Failure may come, and you learn without collapsing into worthlessness. This balance is not indifference, it is mastery. A detached person still cares deeply. They simply refuse to let one result decide the meaning of their life. The sixth promise becomes even more powerful as the body changes. The human mind becomes attached to youth, appearance, strength, and physical ability because the body feels like the most immediate form of identity. Yet the body is moving through time from the moment of birth. No amount of desire can keep it exactly the same. This truth can create fear, but it can also create reverence. When you accept impermanence, you stop wasting the present body while grieving the body you once had, or fearing the body you may one day lose. You care for it, respect it, and use it wisely, but you do not ask it to become eternal. The body is a sacred instrument, not a permanent possession. It allows the soul to act, learn, love, serve, and awaken. One day, like every instrument, it must be returned. The sixth promise prepares the soul for this final release. Every smaller act of letting go becomes practice. Releasing a role teaches you that identity survives change. Releasing a relationship teaches you that love can remain without possession. Releasing success teaches you that worth is deeper than achievement. Releasing youth teaches you to recognize the awareness, witnessing the body. Releasing control teaches you to trust what cannot be managed by the ego. Eventually, the soul must release the body itself. This is why detachment is not merely a technique for feeling better. It is preparation for truth. Everything in the material world is borrowed. The body is borrowed. Possessions are borrowed. Roles are borrowed. Even the people we love are not possessions. They are souls whose paths intersect with ours for a time. When this is understood deeply, gratitude increases. You no longer take presence for granted because you know it is temporary. You speak with greater care because you know conversations may not repeat forever. You value people more honestly because you stop behaving as though time is unlimited. Impermanence does not reduce love, it purifies it. You begin loving people as they are, not merely as you need them to be. You stop postponing kindness. You stop holding back appreciation. You stop believing there will always be another chance to say what the heart already knows. Detachment and gratitude are not opposites. True gratitude becomes possible only when you recognize that nothing is guaranteed. The sixth promise asks you to be fully present precisely because life is temporary, to experience the moment without trying to freeze it, to enjoy beauty without demanding permanence, to love without ownership, to act without obsession, to remember without becoming trapped, to grieve without losing yourself forever. This promise does not make life smaller, it makes every moment more sacred. When you stop demanding permanence, you begin seeing what is actually here. The person sitting beside you, the breath entering your body, the work placed before you, the quiet light moving through the room, the ordinary moment you once ignored while waiting for a greater life. Perhaps this is the hidden gift of release. It returns you to the present. Attachment lives in the past or future. It clings to what was or fears what may be. Presence lives here. The soul can only awaken here, not in the relationship that ended, not in the future result, not in the version of yourself you wish you still were. Awakening happens in the consciousness, observing this moment. This does not mean that grief disappears. Detachment does not make you inhuman. You may still cry when something beautiful ends. You may still miss people, places, and seasons. The difference is that grief no longer becomes a refusal to live. You allow the heart to feel without making pain your permanent home. You honor the ending and remain available to what life is becoming. This is courage. Many people believe courage means holding on at all costs. Sometimes courage means admitting that the chapter is complete. Sometimes it means releasing the dream that no longer aligns with Dharma. Sometimes it means accepting that the person you love cannot walk the path for you. Sometimes it means stepping into uncertainty without carrying everything from the past. The old identity may resist. It may whisper that release means failure, but not everything you release was meant to be won. Some things came to teach you. Some came to awaken you. Some came to accompany you for a season. Some came to reveal where you were still attached. The spiritual question is not always, how do I keep this? Sometimes the question is, what must I become when this is no longer mine? The answer may reveal your hidden strength. You may discover that you can survive what you once believed would destroy you. You may discover that your peace can exist without another person's permission. You may discover that the life beyond the ending contains possibilities the attached mind could not imagine. The soul sees beyond the closed door. The ego sees only what it lost. This is why surrender requires trust. You may not know what comes after release. You only know that holding on is keeping you in pain. The sixth promise asks you to take the step before certainty arrives, to say, I do not know what waits beyond this, but I know I can no longer remain chained to what has ended. This is not blind faith. It is faith born from the recognition that life has carried you through every previous transformation. You have already released many versions of yourself. The child you were has gone. The beliefs you once held have changed. People you once believed you could never live without may no longer be present. Dreams you once considered essential may now appear distant, yet you are still here. Consciousness continued. The soul adapted. This is evidence that letting go does not always destroy you. Sometimes it reveals the part of you that could not be destroyed. The sixth promise was never to hold everything forever. It was to learn what can be loved, what must be released, and what remains when all temporary forms change. The world teaches you to measure your life by what you possess. The soul measures growth by what no longer possesses you. Can praise arrive without controlling you? Can criticism arrive without destroying you? Can love arrive without becoming dependency? Can loss arrive without erasing your identity? Can success arrive without turning into pride? Can failure arrive without turning into shame? Can the past remain remembered without becoming your prison? These are the signs that the promise is being fulfilled. You become free, not because nothing matters, but because what matters is no longer confused with ownership. You still love, you still work, you still dream, you still grieve. But beneath every experience is the quiet understanding that everything arising in time will one day change. This understanding does not make you afraid, it makes you awake. You stop saying, this must remain forever. You begin saying, let me honor it while it is here. You stop saying, my peace depends on this. You begin saying, my peace comes from how consciously I meet this. You stop saying, I cannot survive the ending. You begin remembering how many endings have already become beginnings. Perhaps the thing you are being asked to release today is not being taken to punish you. Perhaps it has completed the role it came to play. Perhaps the relationship taught the lesson. Perhaps the identity carried you as far as it could. Perhaps the dream belonged to an earlier version of you. Perhaps the pain has already revealed its wisdom, and perhaps the next stage of your soul's journey cannot begin while your hands remain closed around what has already ended. Your soul's sixth promise was to open those hands, to bless what came, to learn from what hurt, to honor what stayed, to forgive what left, to carry the wisdom without carrying the chain. And when you finally release what could never truly belong to you forever, you do not become empty, you become available, available to peace, available to truth, available to the present, available to the life waiting beyond attachment. That is the moment surrender stops feeling like loss and begins revealing itself as freedom. Lesson 7. Your soul promised to return to the divine truth. The seventh and final promise your soul made before birth was the deepest promise of all. It was not merely to survive life, complete karma, meet certain people, discover Dharma, transform pain, or release attachment. All of those promises were preparing you for something greater. Your soul promised that after becoming lost in the world of names, forms, desires, identities, relationships, fears, and illusions, it would begin remembering the divine truth from which it had never truly been separate. This is the final mystery at the heart of the Vedic path. The soul appears to enter the world as an individual being, clothed in a body, surrounded by limitation, and separated from everything outside itself. It says, "This is me, that is another, this is mine, that belongs to someone else. I must protect myself, prove myself, collect what I desire, and defend what I possess." From this belief in separation, the entire struggle of human life begins. You compare because you believe another person's light can reduce your own. You become jealous because you believe happiness exists outside you and has been given to someone else. You become possessive because you believe love can be owned. You fear death because you believe the body contains the complete truth of your existence. You chase recognition because you believe the opinions of others can make you more real. You cling to people, achievements, and identities because you have forgotten the deeper ground of consciousness beneath them all. Yet according to the highest Vedic insight, this separation is not the final truth. The Upanishadic vision points toward Atman, the deepest self, and Brahman, the limitless reality underlying all existence. At first, the seeker experiences these as two different things. There is the individual soul within, and there is the divine reality somewhere beyond. The seeker prays, studies, meditates, performs duty, and purifies the mind in the hope of moving closer to what appears distant. But as understanding deepens, a greater truth begins to emerge. The divine was never absent. It was hidden beneath misidentification. The sunlight did not disappear because clouds covered the sky. The ocean did not stop existing because the wave believed itself separate. Space did not become divided because walls were built around it. In the same way, the deepest reality was never destroyed by the appearance of individuality. It was simply forgotten beneath the noise of the ego. Your soul's final promise was to see through this forgetfulness. It promised that one day, perhaps through pain, meditation, surrender, wisdom, devotion, or a moment of profound stillness, you would begin asking whether the person you had spent your whole life protecting was the complete truth of who you are. The ego cannot easily accept this question because it has built an entire world around itself. It wants to remain the center of every story. When something good happens, it says, "I achieved this." When something painful happens, it says, "Why has life done this to me?" When others succeed, it feels threatened. When others disagree, it feels attacked. When life changes unexpectedly, it believes the universe has betrayed its plan. The ego does not merely want to live. It wants life to confirm its importance. But the soul did not come here to make the ego eternal. It came to awaken from the belief that the ego was ever the eternal self. This awakening does not mean destroying your personality or rejecting your human identity. You still use your name. You still care for the body, fulfill responsibilities, build relationships, and make decisions. You still experience preferences, emotions, memories, and individual expression. The difference is that you stop mistaking these temporary features for the complete boundary of your being. You become like an actor who remembers that the role is meaningful but temporary. The actor may cry, struggle, love, and fight within the story, yet somewhere beneath the performance remains the knowledge that the role is not the whole self. Most people forget completely. They become so absorbed in the role that every change feels like destruction. If the role loses status, they feel worthless. If the role loses beauty, they feel invisible. If the role loses a relationship, they feel incomplete. If the role approaches death, They feel that existence itself is ending. The seventh promise was to awaken within the role, to participate fully without forgetting the consciousness through which the participation is happening. This is why the earlier promises were necessary. You could not remember the divine truth while remaining completely controlled by unfinished karma. You could not recognize unity while using relationships only to feed attachment. You could not walk toward liberation while repeatedly betraying Dharma. You could not see clearly while every wound ruled your identity. You could not experience inner freedom while your peace remained chained to what time could take away. Each lesson was removing a layer. Karma revealed the patterns that kept you unconscious. Relationships revealed where love had become possession. Dharma taught you to align action with truth. Pain shattered identities that comfort had protected. Detachment loosened the grip of temporary forms. Now the final promise asks you to look beneath all of them and recognize the consciousness that has been present from the beginning. Ask yourself, who is aware of your thoughts? A thought appears and disappears. Another replaces it. Some thoughts are hopeful, others fearful, some feel spiritual, others selfish. Yet you know that these thoughts are occurring because something is aware of them. If you can observe a thought, then the deepest observer cannot be identical to that thought. The same is true of emotion. Anger rises, remains for a time, and passes. Grief moves in waves. Joy appears and fades. Fear enters the body and later weakens. Yet awareness remains present through each emotional change. If emotion changes while awareness witnesses the change, then your deepest self cannot be limited to one emotion. The body also changes. The body of childhood has disappeared. The body continues aging, healing, weakening, strengthening, and transforming. Cells change, appearance changes, and abilities change. Still, there remains a continuity of presence, the sense that I am, even while everything through which that presence expresses itself is moving through time. The seventh promise asks you to turn toward this unchanging witness, not merely as an idea, but as a living recognition. You may understand intellectually that you are more than the body, and still live as though every physical change defines your worth. You may repeat that all beings are one, and still become consumed by jealousy, arrogance, and hatred. You may speak about the divine while treating people cruelly. You may study sacred teachings while becoming more attached to the identity of being knowledgeable. This is why spiritual knowledge can become another trap. The ego is capable of wearing sacred clothing. It may release material pride and become proud of renunciation. It may stop seeking ordinary praise and begin seeking praise for being wise. It may meditate and secretly compare its progress with others. It may speak of moksha while desiring liberation as one more personal achievement. But moksha cannot become a trophy for the ego, because moksha is freedom from mistaking the ego for the eternal self. The final promise therefore requires surrender deeper than the surrender of possessions. You must eventually release attachment to the spiritual image you have created of yourself. You may have to release the desire to be seen as awakened. You may have to release the need to prove that your path is higher than someone else's. You may have to release the belief that collecting more teachings automatically brings you closer to truth. You may even have to release the one who says, "I will capture the divine." The mind wants to turn the infinite into something it can possess. It seeks a final concept, vision, title, or experience and says, "Now I have found it." Yet the reality pointed toward by Brahman cannot be reduced to an object standing outside the seeker. The eye can see many things, but it cannot turn itself into an ordinary object of its own vision. Fire can burn many things, but it does not burn itself in the same way. Awareness knows every experience, yet awareness itself cannot be contained as one more experience among others. This is why the deepest truth is approached not only by gaining knowledge, but also by removing false identification. You do not create the eternal self. You stop mistaking the temporary for it. You do not manufacture the divine presence. You remove what prevents you from recognizing it. Imagine a mirror covered in dust. The reflection is not created when the dust is removed. It was always possible, but it could not be clearly seen. In the same way, greed, fear, egoism, attachment, resentment, and ignorance do not destroy the divine ground of consciousness. They obscure its recognition. Your soul's final promise was to clean the mirror. Every honest act removes a little dust. Every moment of self-awareness removes a little dust. Every time you choose compassion over cruelty, truth over convenience, humility over pride, and surrender over control, the reflection becomes clearer. This is why spiritual awakening is not separate from the way you live. A person may seek extraordinary visions while ignoring the suffering they create in ordinary relationships. They may search for mystical states while remaining dishonest, impatient, and arrogant. But if spiritual practice does not transform how you speak, love, forgive, work, and respond to difficulty, then the ego may simply be decorating itself with sacred language. The final promise was not to escape humanity. It was to recognize the divine through humanity. The person standing before you is not only a personality, role, social position, or collection of opinions. Beneath their differences is the same mysterious life that animates you. Their mind may be confused. Their actions may require boundaries. Their behavior may not deserve access to your life. Yet the consciousness moving through existence is not limited to the surface differences through which the ego judges. This recognition creates compassion without destroying discernment. Unity does not mean allowing harm. Seeing the sacred in another does not require surrendering your dignity to their unconsciousness. You can recognize the deeper self while refusing the behavior of the ego. You can maintain distance without hatred. You can protect yourself without wishing destruction upon another. You can disagree strongly without forgetting that both of you belong to the same field of existence. This balance is difficult because the ego prefers extremes. It either clings or condemns. It either worships a person or dehumanizes them. The awakened soul sees more clearly. It understands that a person can carry sacred essence while acting through deep ignorance. This is why compassion and boundaries can exist together. The final promise asks you to free your heart from the illusion that hatred makes you stronger. Hatred keeps consciousness tied to the very separation you are trying to transcend. It says, "I can become whole only if another person becomes smaller." But the soul begins realizing that every act of unnecessary cruelty strengthens the prison of ego within itself. You cannot move toward unity while feeding yourself through division. This does not mean avoiding truth or pretending that all behavior is equal. Dharma still matters, justice still matters, consequences still matter. But the inner state through which you pursue them matters as well. Can you oppose harm without becoming consumed by hatred? Can you speak truth without making cruelty your method? Can you protect the innocent without turning revenge into your identity? Can you remain firm while remembering that ignorance, fear, and attachment are often the forces moving through those who cause suffering? This is not weakness. It is spiritual strength, because it refuses to let another person's darkness decide the condition of your consciousness. The seventh promise also changes how you understand loneliness. Loneliness often begins with the belief that you are a completely separate being who must be completed from the outside. You may be surrounded by people and still feel alone because the deeper separation exists within your own understanding. You have forgotten your connection to life itself. You seek one person who will remove every emptiness, understand every wound, confirm every value, and remain forever. When they fail to fulfill this impossible role, you feel abandoned. But no human relationship can permanently remove the existential loneliness created by separation from your own deepest self. People can love you, accompany you, support you, and share beautiful parts of the journey. Yet they cannot enter the center of your consciousness and become the source of your being. The seventh promise was to discover that the deepest companionship is not created by possession. It arises through connection with the divine presence within and around all things. This does not eliminate your need for human relationships. It purifies them. You stop asking people to become your God. You stop demanding that they fill every silence, heal every insecurity, and guarantee that you will never feel incomplete. You begin loving them as fellow travelers rather than owners of your worth. This makes love freer because it is no longer built entirely upon fear. You can appreciate someone without making their departure the end of your existence. You can receive affection without becoming addicted to proof. You can care deeply without losing the awareness that both of you belong to something greater than the relationship itself. The soul begins recognizing that love is not limited to the form through which it arrives. A person may leave, yet your capacity to love remains. A relationship may end, yet the consciousness that experienced love does not disappear. A teacher may die, yet the wisdom awakened through them continues. The form changes, but the deeper current can remain. This understanding prepares the soul for the greatest fear of all, death. The body knows instinctively that it must protect itself, and this instinct is natural. But the mind builds a larger terror around death because it believes everything it is will vanish when the body ends. Vedic wisdom does not ask you to become careless about life. It asks you to investigate whether life is limited entirely to the form you can see. You witness death in nature constantly. Leaves fall, flowers fade, bodies return to the earth, and seasons disappear into one another. Yet life continues transforming. What appears as an ending from one perspective becomes movement from another. The seventh promise was to stop treating death only as the enemy of life and begin recognizing it as part of the mystery through which forms change. The body is precious because it is temporary. It is the vehicle through which you can act, love, serve, seek, and awaken. But the vehicle is not the traveler. When a garment becomes worn, the one wearing it is not identical to the cloth. When a lamp breaks, the nature of light is not understood merely by studying the broken form. The Vedic vision uses such images to turn the mind toward a possibility. What you call I may be deeper than the body through which it presently expresses itself. This does not remove every fear immediately. Fear may still arise. The body may still resist pain and ending, but the soul gradually develops a trust that existence is larger than one visible chapter. Death becomes not merely disappearance, but the final act of release from the temporary identity. Every previous surrender prepared you for this. You released childhood. You released people. You released roles. You released dreams. You released beliefs. You released versions of yourself. One day, the body too must be released. The seventh promise was to face this truth not with despair, but with awakening, to live so consciously that death does not find you still waiting to begin your real life. Many people postpone truth. They say they will live according to Dharma later, forgive later, speak honestly later, meditate later, love more deeply later, and release resentment later. They behave as though time has promised endless opportunities. But death does not always announce itself. The awareness of death is not meant to make life dark. It is meant to make life sacred. When you remember that time is limited, unnecessary pride begins losing power. Arguments that once seemed important become smaller. You stop delaying gratitude. You begin asking whether the life you are living reflects what your soul truly values. The final promise is fulfilled not only at the end of life, but in every moment when death teaches you how to live. Can you speak the truth before silence becomes regret? Can you forgive before the opportunity disappears? Can you express love before the person becomes a memory? Can you walk your Dharma before fear consumes the years? Can you stop living for people whose opinions will not accompany you beyond the grave? Can you release what has already ended before your own life ends, while you are still emotionally trapped inside it? These questions are not meant to create panic. They are meant to awaken priority. The ego spends enormous energy on what cannot last. It protects image, status, possession, and superiority while neglecting consciousness. But at the end of the body, what becomes of these things? The wealth remains behind. The title remains behind. The praise and criticism remain in other minds. The home belongs to someone else. The body returns to nature. What remains significant is the consciousness shaped through the way you lived, the truth you recognized, the love you expressed, the karma you transformed, and the ignorance you began to dissolve. This is why the final promise brings simplicity. You begin seeing that life is not asking you to control everything. It is asking you to awaken through what arrives. You do not need every person to approve of you. You need to stop betraying your deepest understanding. You do not need every desire to be fulfilled. You need to see which desires are controlling you. You do not need a painless life. You need consciousness strong enough to transform pain. You do not need permanent possession. You need gratitude while things are present and courage when they leave. You do not need to become greater than everyone. You need freedom from the part of you that survives through comparison. The seventh promise is the return from complexity to truth. But this return does not necessarily happen through one dramatic, mystical experience. Sometimes the soul remembers slowly. It remembers when you sit in silence and, for a brief moment, stop chasing thought. It remembers when you look at another person and feel compassion without personal gain. It remembers when you perform a duty sincerely and forget the need for applause. It remembers when you stand beneath the night sky and feel the smallness of the ego without feeling the smallness of existence. It remembers when grief breaks your defenses and reveals a love larger than possession. It remembers when you forgive someone not because they were right, but because hatred has become too heavy to carry. It remembers when you experience joy and do not immediately fear its ending. It remembers when you can say, "This moment is enough." These moments may seem ordinary, yet they loosen the illusion of separation. The mind becomes quieter, and beneath the noise you sense a presence that was not created by achievement. It does not depend upon someone agreeing with you. It does not become greater through praise or smaller through rejection. It simply is. This silent being is closer than every thought, yet the mind overlooks it because it is always searching for something dramatic. The ego believes the divine must appear as an extraordinary vision, but the deepest truth may be hidden in the awareness through which every vision is known. You search outward because outward searching gives the ego something to pursue. It imagines that the next teacher, ritual, book, place, or experience will finally provide what is missing. Teachers, teachings, rituals, pilgrimage, devotion, and study can all become sacred supports, but their purpose is not to make you dependent upon the outer form forever. Their highest purpose is to turn your attention toward the truth they are pointing to. A finger pointing toward the moon is useful, but worshipping the finger while never looking at the moon misses the purpose. In the same way, sacred words are maps. They are not substitutes for the journey. You may memorize the language of liberation and still remain imprisoned by anger, fear, and attachment. The seventh promise asks you to move from information to realization. Do not merely speak of peace. Observe what disturbs it. Do not merely speak of non-attachment. Notice what controls you. Do not merely speak of unity. Observe where you still need others to become smaller. Do not merely speak of the soul. Watch how quickly you become identified with praise, insult, beauty, status, and fear. The purpose of spiritual teaching is not to decorate the mind. It is to reveal the mind's chains. This revelation can be uncomfortable. As awareness grows, you begin seeing motivations you once ignored. You realize that some acts of kindness were secretly seeking approval. Some sacrifices were attempts to control others through guilt. Some spiritual practices were performed to feel superior. Some relationships were maintained not through love, but through fear of loneliness. Do not use this recognition to hate yourself. Awareness is already the beginning of freedom. What remains unconscious controls you. What becomes visible can be transformed. The seventh promise does not require perfection before awakening. It requires honesty. Can you see the ego without defending it? Can you recognize attachment without pretending it is love? Can you admit fear without allowing fear to become your master? Can you observe the desire for praise without immediately feeding it? Every honest observation creates space between awareness and the pattern. Within that space, choice appears. And where conscious choice appears, karma begins losing its automatic power. This is why the final promise includes both wisdom and devotion. Wisdom asks, "Who am I beneath all temporary forms?" Devotion says, "Let my life belong to something greater than ego." Wisdom removes false identification. Devotion softens the heart. Without wisdom, devotion can become blind attachment to form. Without devotion, wisdom can become cold pride. Together, they guide the soul towards surrender that is both clear and loving. You may call the divine by a sacred name, approach through meditation, serve through selfless action, study through inquiry, or surrender through love. The outer paths may differ, but each becomes transformative when it reduces ego and reveals truth. The path is not proven by the words you use. It is revealed by what you are becoming. Are you becoming more compassionate, more truthful, less controlled by praise, less eager to condemn, more capable of forgiveness, more willing to fulfill responsibility without recognition, more peaceful in uncertainty, more aware of the sacredness of life? These changes are signs that spiritual practice is moving beyond the surface. The seventh promise also reveals why service is so powerful. When you serve only to be admired, service strengthens ego. But when you serve because you recognize life in another, the boundary of separation weakens. For a moment, you stop asking only, "What can I gain?" and begin asking, "How can consciousness express compassion through me?" Service becomes worship when the person you help is not treated as inferior. You recognize that circumstances may differ, but the deeper essence is not divided by status. The hand does not consider itself superior to the foot, because both belong to one body. In the same way, the awakened soul begins seeing humanity as interconnected rather than as isolated competitors. This recognition changes the meaning of success. Success is no longer only how high you rise. It is also how much suffering you reduce while rising. It is not only how much you possess, it is whether possession has made your heart smaller or more generous. It is not only whether people know your name, it is whether your presence brings greater truth, peace, and courage into the lives around you. The ego wants to leave a monument. The soul wants to leave less darkness. This does not mean you must abandon worldly ambition. You can build, create, lead, teach, earn, and achieve. But the final promise asks, who is being served through your achievement? If success strengthens greed, arrogance, and separation, it may enlarge the outer life while shrinking consciousness. If success becomes a means of service, responsibility, and contribution, it can become part of Dharma. The same outer achievement can either strengthen bondage or support awakening, depending upon the consciousness behind it. This is why intention matters so deeply. The final promise is not fulfilled by escaping the world, but by acting within the world without becoming completely possessed by it. The lotus grows in water, but is not drowned by the water. In the same way, the awakened person lives among possessions without making possession the self, experiences relationships without turning them into chains, fulfills responsibility without being consumed by pride, and encounters change without losing the deepest center. This does not happen perfectly or immediately. Awakening is often a rhythm of remembrance and forgetfulness. One day you feel deeply connected, and the next day anger controls you. One moment you understand detachment, and later fear makes you cling. You forgive, then an old memory awakens resentment. You recognize the witness, then become completely lost inside thought again. Do not believe the journey is false because you forget. The promise is fulfilled through returning. Every time you notice that you have become lost, awareness has already begun bringing you back. You return to the breath. You return to silence. You return to Dharma. You return to compassion. you return to the witness. You return to the truth that one temporary emotion does not contain the whole of you. This repeated return slowly changes consciousness. The gap between forgetting and remembering becomes shorter. The ego may still arise, but you recognize it more quickly. Anger may still appear, but it does not control your words as easily. Attachment may still whisper, but you can see its fear. Praise may still feel pleasant, yet it no longer owns you. Loss may still hurt, but you do not believe the divine has vanished with the form. This is spiritual maturity, not the absence of humanity, but awareness within humanity. The seventh promise reaches its highest expression when the seeker realizes that the journey toward the divine was never a journey across physical distance. You were not a separate object moving toward a distant God. You were consciousness slowly removing the illusion that made the divine appear absent. The waves searched for the ocean while being made entirely of ocean. The ray searched for light while never becoming anything other than light. The pot believed the space within it was separate from the space outside, but when the pot broke, no real division remained. The ego is like the pot. It creates a boundary and says, "This consciousness is mine. Everything else is outside me." The final realization does not necessarily destroy functional individuality, but it reveals that individuality was never absolute separation. The life in you belongs to the same mystery expressing itself through countless forms. This understanding cannot be fully captured by words, because words divide. They name one thing and distinguish it from another. Yet the reality being pointed toward exists before these divisions. Silence sometimes teaches what language cannot. This is why the soul is drawn toward stillness, not because the world is evil, but because constant noise prevents subtle truth from being recognized. When the mind is always consuming, comparing, planning, reacting, and speaking, it cannot hear what has no need to shout. The divine presence does not compete for your attention. It waits beneath the movement of attention itself. In silence, you begin noticing how restless the mind has become. At first, meditation may not feel peaceful. It may reveal the chaos you had been hiding through distraction. Thoughts rise, memories appear, desires demand attention, and old wounds speak. Do not assume this means you are failing. The mud was already in the water. Stillness simply allowed you to see it. If you remain patient, observation begins purifying what reaction had strengthened. You stop fighting every thought and stop obeying every thought. The mind gradually learns that it can be witnessed without being followed. This witnessing is part of the final promise. It reveals that freedom is not the ability to prevent every thought from arising. Freedom is the ability to recognize that thought does not always deserve obedience. A fearful thought may arise, but you do not have to build a life around it. An angry thought may arise, but you do not have to turn it into harm. A jealous thought may arise, but you do not have to feed comparison. A proud thought may arise, but you can see the insecurity beneath it. Awareness brings light to the hidden movement of mind. In that light, unconscious patterns begin weakening. The seventh promise, therefore, does not remove you from karma through magical escape. It changes the consciousness, creating and responding to karma. You begin acting with greater awareness. You stop planting certain seeds. You accept consequences without repeating the same patterns. You recognize desire before it becomes obsession, and anger before it becomes destruction. Eventually, the chain weakens because the one who once reacted automatically is no longer completely asleep. This is how liberation begins within ordinary life. Moksha is often imagined only as a final state beyond birth and death, but the taste of liberation can begin now. Every time you are free from a reaction that once controlled you, there is a glimpse of moksha. Every time you forgive and release resentment, a chain breaks. Every time you act according to Dharma rather than fear, inner bondage weakens. Every time you love without possession, separation loosens. Every time you witness thought without becoming it, the self shines more clearly. These moments may not be final liberation, but they reveal its direction. The soul begins discovering freedom before the body ends. This is important because the promise was not to wait passively for death. It was to awaken while you still had the power to choose. You are alive now. You can change the way you speak. You can repair what can be repaired. You can stop repeating harm. You can release what no longer belongs to your path. You can create silence. You can serve. You can question the identity built from fear. You can begin living as though consciousness matters more than image. Do not postpone the final promise. The ego will always say, later, later, when life becomes easier. Later, when the children grow. Later, when money is secure. Later, when pain disappears. Later, when there is more time. But life may never become perfectly arranged for awakening. The path begins inside the life you have, not the ideal life imagined by the mind. Your responsibilities can become practice. Your relationships can become mirrors. Your pain can become purification. Your work can become service. Your solitude can become meditation. Your endings can become surrender. Nothing needs to be wasted. This is the hidden beauty of the promise. Every part of life can become part of the return. Even mistakes can become teachers if met with honesty. Even delay can become preparation. Even loneliness can lead you inward. Even failure can break the pride that kept you separated. Even death, the event the ego fears most, can become the final doorway through which temporary identity is released. The soul's return is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is simply the moment you stop fighting reality and become fully present. Sometimes it is the moment you look into another person's eyes and remember that they carry struggles you cannot see. Sometimes it is the moment you choose kindness when nobody would have blamed you for cruelty. Sometimes it is the moment you release the need to win an argument because truth does not require humiliation. Sometimes it is the moment you sit alone and realize that solitude is not emptiness when you are no longer separated from your own being. These moments are sacred because they reveal the divine, not as an idea, but as a way of seeing. The seventh promise changes your vision. You begin seeing life not as a collection of objects to possess, but as a field of sacred relationships. Food becomes more than consumption. It becomes the earth sustaining the body. Breath becomes more than a biological function. It becomes the invisible movement connecting you to life. Another person becomes more than their usefulness to you. They become a soul moving through their own karma and lessons. The body becomes more than appearance. It becomes a temporary temple of experience. Time becomes more than something to waste. It becomes the limited opportunity through which awakening can occur. When vision changes, the world changes without changing its outer form. The same life that once seemed ordinary becomes filled with meaning. You no longer need constant excitement because presence reveals depth within simplicity. You no longer need to prove your spiritual worth because the need to prove begins appearing as another form of forgetfulness. You become quieter within, not passive, but grounded, not emotionless, but less enslaved, not detached from love, but detached from possession, not above humanity, but more deeply compassionate toward it. This is the return. It is not a return to a physical place you once left. It is the return of awareness to the truth it forgot. The divine was present in every lesson. It was present when karma repeated itself, waiting for consciousness to change. It was present in the people who loved you and those who exposed your wounds. It was present in the inner voice calling you toward Dharma. It was present in pain, not as cruelty, but as the awareness capable of transforming suffering. It was present in every ending, revealing that the eternal cannot be found in what time removes. And it is present now as the very consciousness through which these words are being heard. Your mind may understand only a small part of this. That is enough. A seed does not need to become a tree in one moment. It only needs to open. The seventh promise begins fulfilling itself the moment the question becomes alive within you. What if I have never been as separate from the divine as I believed? Carry that question into silence. Carry it into relationships. Carry it into moments of fear. Carry it into success, so pride does not possess you. Carry it into failure, so shame does not destroy you. Carry it into grief, so you remember that love is deeper than form. Carry it into death, so the temporary does not hide the eternal. Do not force an answer. Live in a way that makes the answer visible. Speak with truth. Act with compassion. Perform your Dharma. Observe your mind. Release what cannot remain. Serve without demanding recognition. Love without ownership. Forgive without surrendering wisdom. Remember that every person you meet is fighting through layers of ignorance, fear, karma, and longing, just as you are. The final promise was never to become perfect in the eyes of the world. It was to become transparent enough that the light of consciousness could move through you with less obstruction. Your kindness becomes part of the return. Your courage becomes part of the return. Your surrender becomes part of the return. Your silence becomes part of the return. Every time the ego loosens, even briefly, the soul remembers what it came here to discover. Then life stops appearing as a meaningless sequence of random events. The pain had a lesson. The relationships had a purpose. The endings created space. The desires revealed attachment. The responsibilities shaped Dharma. The silence revealed the witness. Every road was quietly turning you inward. Perhaps you believed you were traveling farther into the world, but beneath every experience your soul was traveling back toward truth. This was the seventh promise, that after forgetting yourself in countless names and forms, after searching for completion through people, possessions, achievements, and identities, you would finally recognize that the sacred reality you were seeking had been present within every breath. You were never asked to bring the divine closer. You were asked to remove the illusion of distance. You were never asked to manufacture the soul. You were asked to remember it. You were never asked to conquer life. You were asked to awaken through it. And when this recognition becomes more than a thought, when separation begins dissolving and the heart no longer lives entirely through fear, the seeker understands the hidden promise made before birth. Your soul came into the world to experience individuality, but it promised not to remain imprisoned by individuality forever. It entered Maya, but promised to seek truth. It accepted karma, but promised to awaken beyond unconscious repetition. It entered relationships, but promised to learn love without possession. It entered pain, but promised to transform suffering into wisdom. It entered impermanence, but promised to discover what change could not destroy. It entered the appearance of separation, but promised to return to unity. And in the final moment of remembrance, the soul does not say, "I have reached something that was once far away." It quietly recognizes, "What I was seeking has always been the deepest truth of what I am." Perhaps your life was never a collection of random events. Perhaps the pain, the people, the repeated lessons, the broken dreams, the inner restlessness, and the sudden moments of awakening were all connected to a promise your soul made before entering this world. A promise to remember who you truly are beneath the identities others placed upon you. A promise to complete the karma that kept returning through different people and different situations. A promise to meet the souls who would love you, challenge you, wound you, awaken you, and force you to discover parts of yourself that comfort could never reveal. A promise to walk the path of Dharma, even when fear asked you to remain small and the world tried to pull you toward a life that did not belong to you. A promise to transform pain into wisdom, so that what hurt you would not control the person you were becoming. A promise to release the people, possessions, dreams, and identities that time was never going to allow you to keep forever. And finally, a promise to return to the divine truth, to remember that beneath the body, beneath the ego, beneath the story of who you believe yourself to be, there is a consciousness that has never been separated from the sacred source of life. Maybe that is why you have never been completely satisfied by ordinary success. Maybe that is why, even after receiving something you once desperately wanted, another longing remained. It was not always because you needed more. Sometimes it was because your soul remembered that no temporary achievement could replace the truth it came here to discover. Your soul did not promise that this life would be easy. It promised that every difficulty could awaken you. It did not promise that every person would stay. It promised that every meaningful connection could reveal something you needed to understand. It did not promise that you would never become lost. It promised that the path back to truth would remain hidden somewhere within you, waiting for the moment you became ready to listen. And perhaps that moment is now. Do not leave this message as only something you heard. Carry it into your life. When the same painful pattern returns, remember the promise of karma. When someone awakens a deep wound within you, remember the promise hidden in relationships. When fear asks you to abandon your truth, remember your Dharma. When pain tries to make you bitter, remember that your soul promised to turn suffering into wisdom. When life asks you to let go, remember that release is not always the end of your journey. Sometimes it is the doorway to the next stage of it. And when you feel alone, forgotten, or disconnected from everything sacred, remember the final promise. The divine truth was never as far from you as your mind believed. It has been present in your awareness, present in your breath, present in your ability to love, present in the silence beneath your thoughts, present in every moment when you chose compassion over anger, truth over fear, and surrender over control. Now ask yourself one question. Which of these 7 promises is your soul trying to fulfill in your life right now? Is it asking you to remember who you are, to break an old karmic pattern, to understand the purpose of a relationship, to follow your Dharma, to transform your pain, to release what has already ended, or to return to the divine truth hidden within you? Comment the number that speaks most deeply to your soul. Do not choose with the mind alone. Choose the one that made something within you become silent, because that silence may be remembrance. Share this message with someone who feels lost, because they may not need another opinion. They may need to remember the promise their soul has forgotten. And subscribe to this journey of Vedic wisdom, karma, rebirth, Atman, Dharma, and Moksha, because the more deeply you understand the ancient teachings, the more clearly you begin to understand your own life. Before you leave, remember this final truth. You were not born only to survive. You were not born only to collect possessions, chase approval, repeat pain, grow old, and disappear. You were born to awaken. You were born to remember. You were born to transform. And somewhere beyond fear, attachment, and illusion, your soul is still waiting for you to fulfill the hidden promise it made before birth.